Hey, what's up, everyone? There's been a lot of talk about Elestrals being just like insert any TCG, and I kind of wanted to go look at similarities and differences from other card games I've played and kind of point out what makes Elestrals fun, different, unique, what its experience is kind of self contained, or what you get out of Elestrals. Before I start with that, I do want to go over some pretty common notions that basically all forms of media are derivative. From our movies to our shows, our card games, even, that derivation leads to a lot of unique, different experiences, melding together different concepts. We see this in gaming, though. Like, things like Dota, League of Legends, Smite, they're all MOBAs. They all kind of derived from Dota. Our TCG sphere, we have things that, derive from Magic. Even Yu-Gi-Oh! Was inspired by Magic. We have things that derive from Hearthstone. Hearthstone's derived from, mana systems. That was the Magic Gathering thing. It all kind of is circular reasoning and logic derivation that makes everything kind of unique depending on what you pull from to make your game, card game, your media, etc. It makes it different. So the most commonly things that are brought up with Elestrals is it's really compared to a lot to the Pokemon TCG and Yu-Gi-Oh! Thematically, Elestrals has the monster genre space, its elemental stylings are similar to Pokemon, and at first look, Yu-Gi-Oh's inspired field play, but it really kind of has its own flow and designs. It sets it apart from each game and becomes its own unique thing. So let's start by looking at Pokemon's comparisons, and a lot of people draw the comparison immediately because the creator of Elestrals was a Pokemon YouTuber. Now, when looking at Pokemon has distinct evolution stages. You go, say, Bulbasaur into Ivysaur into Venusaur. Yes, I know there's things like EXs, VMAXs, etc. that are all slightly different than that, but that was its core mechanic when it started. Ascensions and Elestrals are a little bit more fluid, allowing you to go in basically any direction, either going up stages, down stages, or even going to different elements, to different Elestrals. You don't have to follow Quackle to Imperial. You could end up at Voltempest if you wanted to, or maybe a weird Misenchanted Centaur. Whereas in Pokemon, you kind of start at Venusaur, or pardon me, you start at Bulbasaur and end at Venusaur. It's pretty cut and dry. You're stuck going A, B, C. Then when you look at how Pokemon does its elements, so Elestrals also does elements, and it also does attaching elements to cards for abilities and effects and attacks, in a sense. But Pokemon uses an elemental weakness system, where Elestrals doesn't do the weakness things. Instead, it requires you to run different spirits on cards to prevent or mitigate effects. For example, if you run water spirits, you won't be affected by tsunami. I think that's a little bit more of a controllable, less feels bad mechanic than just taking double damage. Because I can run, a couple water spirits in my earth deck or a couple wind spirits in my thunder deck to prevent certain card effects. Whereas if I'm playing, say, currently I'm playing Spite Opt EX in the Pokemon TCG, if I run against like an Arcanine EX deck, that Arcanine EX with any attack will basically one hit KO my Spite Ops just for existing as a fire Pokemon. And there's not really much counterplay I can do with the deck building when I'm playing a grass deck that's requiring Leafeon and Spite Ops EX. It just gets KO'd from fire stuff. And it's just rock, paper, scissors, you lose. And that feels bad. I think Elestral's kind of weakness system of requiring spirits on board to mitigate effects as opposed to just taking double damage, I like that a little bit more mechanically. I find it a little bit more interesting and deck building wise intriguing than just I lose to fire now. Now moving on to Yu-Gi-Oh, there is one big conception of, oh, it's just GOAT Yu-Gi-Oh, and that's said all the time. And to be honest, the easiest way to describe Elestrals to a Yu-Gi-Oh player is just saying, yeah, it's GOAT Yu-Gi-Oh with Pokemon, or with a twist, or with Magic involved, Magic the Gathering. But rapidly, the differences kind of show up. Yes, the field is similar. Card types and zones are similar. Invoke runes are spell cards. Trap cards are counter runes. It's pretty closely mirror to Yu-Gi-Oh! But where the changes are in that system is kind of the meat and potatoes here. Again, so every card in Elestrals has a cost. It's not just restrictions, timings, triggers, but actually you need this amount of spirits of this type to cast this card. We still have access to all of our resources every turn, so we can kind of just cast a bunch of cards over and over again. So kind of plays a little bit like Yu-Gi-Oh with spell cards there. But just like Yu-Gi-Oh, we get one normal cast. And a lot of games don't limit your amount of creatures you can play per turn when you have a limited resource. But Celestial does, I think partially because we have access to all 20 of it at all times. If we could just play every Celestial in our hand, it would kind of make the games uninteresting. So I think it's just good game design having the one normal cast just like Yu-Gi-Oh does. Not necessarily for the same reason Yu-Gi-Oh does, but at the same time also the same reason Yu-Gi-Oh does. Yu-Gi-Oh's had the normal summon because everything was quote-unquote free. Celestial's cards aren't free, but we can cast any amount of them as per resources we have in our Spirit deck. So the one normal cast is kind of the pretty cut and dry, like everyone's like, oh, it's Yu-Gi-Oh, I can play my normal cast. But that being said, even with Yu-Gi-Oh's normal cast system and its kind of spell and trap card system, modern Yu-Gi-Oh is grossly different than GOAT format or classic Yu-Gi-Oh. It's changed so much. It's like every time there's a new mechanic in Yu-Gi-Oh, somebody says that it jumped the shark, it's no longer the same game. And that's not always true, but we are at a point now where if you were to take a Yu-Gi-Oh player from, say, 20 years ago, they would be completely and utterly lost with the new game. Yu-Gi-Oh, modern Yu-Gi-Oh is just something completely different. And I think that's kind of why Elestrals has picked up a lot of like interest in Yu-Gi-Oh players, because it kind of mirrors that early kind of heyday of Yu-Gi-Oh, or not necessarily heyday, but like what people think is one of the greatest like times to play Yu-Gi-Oh, and it's attractive to people. So Elestrals, yeah, plays similar to Yu-Gi-Oh in a sense, but the spirits and the spirit system moving resources around board really takes it away from Yu-Gi-Oh and makes it something different and interesting, in my opinion. We could spend all day talking about, what's, different or unique or compare and contrast Celestials ad nauseum to basically any other TCG. Resources in a separate deck, that's out there. Like, color identity or class identity, that's out there. Life decking, it's out there. Like, it's all out there. It really is. But it's kind of how Celestials derives it and brings everything together to make its own unique, fun, and interesting gameplay. And it really comes down to like how the spirits interact with how you play the game. Like, do you cast your last spirit from your spirit deck to try to cast a last minute earthquake, or maybe sacrifice some Elestrals by ripping their spirits off to cast it instead and saving your life? Do you run out of life by just like pushing really heavy on board for a huge board control in fear of getting blown out? A lot of TCGs with the life system, everyone will say your life points don't matter until it's your last life. In Elestrals, it doesn't really feel that way, because if you have one life left, you're not casting anything. So if you run out of spirits or run out of spirits or life of a specific element that you need, you're kind of at a loss. You're just stuck there. So every life point matters a lot more in Elestrals, it feels like, than a lot of other games. Or at least starts mattering sooner. Your first couple of expends don't really hurt you that much, but when you start getting to like your last half of your resource pool, it starts really getting tricky, and figuring out what you still need in your deck, what you might need to cast later to win, it gets really interesting, and it's fun, unique that way. And if you get your resources on board, you can find ways to use them again, or use them to recast invoke runes and such. It's a really interesting kind of amalgamation of mechanics around its resource system. And I do hope that the game continues to kind of evolve and adapt, getting spirits on board and moving spirits around board. I think that's really what makes Elestrals feel unique and fun. Or finding ways to recycle spirits that you've used on board and turning your deck slowly into a more life, where you kind of pull spirits out of it, and then it's what spirits you have kind of in play to play the game. There's a lot of things it can do there, but that's what I like about Elestrals. I like this kind of secondary game within the game of just managing where your spirits are, whether in your underworld, on board, or in your deck, as well as playing your cards and trying to win and stopping your opponent from doing their stuff. I think that's super fun. And that's what I like about Astral. And I think that it's got enough unique and interesting things to go up on the shelf with the rest of my card games. I play a lot of card games. But I'm curious what you guys think. You know, what's your favorite games? Do you guys dabble in a lot like I do? I play a lot of TCGs. Or are you purist to your favorites? I know a lot of people don't go outside the Magic the Gathering bubble, don't go outside the Yu-Gi-Oh bubble. I'd love to know, what you guys think, and I'm always active in my comments, so if you leave me a comment out there, I'll definitely respond to it. And if you guys want more content like this or have something you'd like to do, let me know. Otherwise, just give me a like, send me a subscribe. I appreciate all the support, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.